Hello and welcome to Heads Up, a year-long mental health awareness journey, Dartmouth Health's webinar series, which focuses on important mental health topics that affect all of us. I'm Audra Burns, your moderator for the series. Today, we will discuss the ways social media can affect mental health, especially among young people, and how we can strike a healthy balance. I have three really great guests. First, we have Dr. Steve Schlotzman. He is a child psychiatrist at Dartmouth Health Children's. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Heather Nyart, Executive Director of Media Power Youth. Hi, Heather.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. And a special guest, we have Kenny Olabrice. He is a youth advisor for Media Power Youth. Hi, Kenny.
Hi, good morning. Glad to be here.
Thank you all for joining me for this very important discussion. Now, for the purpose of this discussion, we are going to define social media as any digital platform where people can post things anonymously or not, and where people can have virtual interactions back and forth. So these can include places like Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever the latest social media platform is that's going to pop up by the time we air this video, as well as video games and streaming platforms like Twitch. So Steve, let's start with you. Can you tell us what effect does social media actually have on kids?
Wow, how much time do we have? So we're just starting to learn the answer to this. The research comes in new every day. And as you just alluded to, because the platforms change so often, it's hard for the research to keep pace on what we know. What we do know, and what stays consistent across multiple platforms, is that teens are much more susceptible to the messages, both positive and negative, that are put out across social media platforms.
It's a very interesting world that we now live in with what our children are navigating, certainly when it comes to all of these platforms. So Heather, how does your organization, Media Power Youth, help navigate the ins and outs of social media?
Media Power Youth, it's a nonprofit here in New Hampshire, and we partner with lots of different types of organizations. And we'll host discussions, activities, media creation projects. And we create this opportunity for young people and adults to talk about the stressors of social media and strategies for managing them. So for example, we'll talk about how to de-escalate conflict when there is an argument on Snapchat, and so many different ways that a student could handle those things. Sometimes we do it online, like in sessions like this, but we also host in-person events.
Such a great organization for sure. And for our viewers, we'll be sure to have the link to their website in the comments of this video. So Kenny, in your experience, what is the most concerning trend in social media usage among your peers?
Yeah, so there's a few as of recent, but I think if I had to choose just one, the most concerning, I would say that definitely the increased anxiety in my peers. I've noticed especially social media tends to highlight the worst and kind of disregard the best of us. And so that can really lead to fears and anxieties in my peers and my community, especially about the future.
Kenny, thank you for sharing that. I think as parents and community members, you know, when kids express anxiety, we often think maybe it's from the pressure of school sports or it's the pressure of academics, but now anxiety is coming from social media. So thank you for sharing that insight. Steve, why are children, you know, teens and young adults more susceptible to overusing social media?
Well, as a child psychiatrist and also as a dad of a 21-year-old, 16-year-old, I can tell you that their brains are really different. They might seem completely rational and logical at first, but our brains, especially when we're at that young teen age, we're getting ready to leave the house, which means that we react that much more strongly to how we perceived others are perceiving us. So you see those things that Kenny just talked about online, and you take them much more seriously, much more viscerally. And that is a hard thing to shake, especially when what you put online doesn't go away.
It's so true. I always tell my children, you know, that it's so important to know that when something goes online, it could be on the front page of a newspaper. Like, you just got to be so cautious and careful. And I think young developing brains don't quite understand that reach that they can certainly have. And what an interesting perspective as not only your position at Dartmouth Health Children's, but also as a father. Heather, you know, how can adults help kids develop skills to have a healthy experience with social media?
Talking about regularly about media and experiencing media together can go a long way to helping children develop these skills. You know, when you're watching a movie and there's a reference to social media, talk about the situation and ask your child for their perspective on perhaps what happened in the film. If your child is into video games, play the video game with them and start to see that from their perspective, which is a great launch pad for having conversations. There's a lot of mistrust between adults and youth when it comes to talking about media. So if we're only talking about it, if we're taking the phone away, that can be a real challenge. The other advice I have is for adults to model positive digital behavior in their own lives. And so, for instance, if you're going to post something on social media about your child, ask your child's permission and before posting. Those small kind of interactions and discussions help children to see what are healthy digital behaviors.
I love that, healthy digital behaviors. That's great. And what you said about how, you know, parents or caregivers if they're watching movies and the topic comes up on social media, using that as kind of a springboard, because I feel like parents might often have trouble even knowing what questions maybe to even ask. So that's such a great tip, to just use those conversations that are already happening around them as springboards. So now, Kenny, you have an interesting project. So can you tell us about this project that you're working on to help middle school students develop social emotional intelligence, and how does it relate to social media use?
Yes, so Heather, I, and a group of other high schoolers on an advisory board worked to create a curriculum for middle schoolers that can be employed in classrooms that will help to teach empathy and the ability to communicate effectively on social media. And I think this is especially important for middle schoolers because that's the age in which they're developing these habits, and in which we really need to intervene to help them develop good habits so that their mental health can prosper as they grow older.
That sounds like a wonderful project. And I think certainly the middle school age is what Steve was saying is an important age group to reach. So that's a great project. And we'll have more information on that as well in the link to this video. So Heather, what resources exist for everyone to empower young people to use social media in a way that really supports well-being?
So some of the resources that are available is to host a workshop in your community, and Media Power Youth does facilitate learning experiences like this. So for example, we'll partner with a school and host a parent night where parents and children can kind of together and create their own family media agreement, and how do we want to use media as a family. We also have resources for classroom educators. So the project that Kenny just mentioned is a set of curriculum resources called Digital Climate Change that ELA teachers and health teachers can use to begin to help students develop these types of communication skills.
Yeah, that's excellent. And having those conversations is really important. So it's great to know that we have resources available for our community to start these dialogues. So before we wrap up, you know, what is one key thing that you want our viewers to take away from this conversation? Steve, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to cheat because I'm going to give two things. The first one is that there's a big mistake we can make with social media, with really all of the internet. And that's either to entirely demonize it, make it all bad, or to just entirely unregulate it from a parental perspective. Either approach, as with a lot of things, doesn't allow us to find that middle ground, that sort of golden center where things are healthy and tolerated and how we kind of learn to roll with them. The other thing I just want to remind parents of, I know this as a dad, that you're going to say things to your kids and they're going to roll their eyes at best, and at maybe neutrally just kind of walk away, and they're going to seem like they don't hear you, but they do. I know that because those same kids come into my office later and they say, hey, my dad said this today, and it kind of makes some sense. So even if you think you're talking to a brick wall, you're not. You're talking to your kid and they are listening.
I'm so happy to hear that, because as a mom of a 12 and 14-year-old, I often feel like I'm talking to a brick wall. So that is such powerful advice coming from a professional like you, that for us parents out there and caregivers, they are listening. So thank you for that insight. Kenny, what about you?
Yeah, so definitely I'd say for both adults and for my peers is to just be aware of the effects of social media. for my peers, because it will allow them to be more in control of their own emotions and be able to regulate themselves, and for adults because it will allow them to be more aware of the effects social media might have on their children and be able to help them more accurately.
That's wonderful. And I think it's the point too that Steve was making. It's striking that healthy balance, not only youth, but also the parents having that healthy balance of what social media usage is. So Heather, what advice do you have for a wrap up?
I think it's helpful to think of social media not necessarily as this piece of technology, but really this ecosystem. And our young people have a tremendous amount of power, more power than I think that they realize, in shaping the digital communities that they're a part of. But at the same time, they need our help and they need opportunities to practice communication skills and conflict resolution and so self-awareness. These are the things that are going to help them as they're trying to navigate these digital spaces.
That's such a great word, navigate. I think that's what ultimately we need to do, because it needs to be that healthy balance of social media usage, but also navigating it in the appropriate way to avoid the stressors like Kenny mentioned with anxiety and the balance that Steve mentioned. So that's wonderful. Steve, Heather, and Kenny, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your insights on this important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great conversation.
So our goal for this webinar series is to help drive the conversation about mental health and to offer health education and support. You can view past Heads Up segment, as also the resources that I mentioned earlier. Those will all be posted at a link at the bottom of this video. Thank you all for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, take care.